Center for Spiritual Living. I'm Reverend Tim. I have the shirt to prove that I wasn't loafing on vacation. So this is a Machu Picchu Inca trail, Camino de Incas. I learned something that may not even be true, but I had thought of it as being a sendero, which is like a path, a roadway. But they corrected me fairly quickly and said, no, it's a camino. And like the Camino de Compostela. And a camino may have a road or a path, sometimes not. But it is a road in the way that translates better as way. So as Jesus spoke and said, I am the way. Or as Gandhi spoke and said, there's no textbook, there's no teaching that I can teach you. My life is the way. And in some ways, that's what the road that I was on, I chose to make it a road, was really and is more of a path. And we're all on our own path, but we're all on the same path. So I have the t-shirt, Camino. Camino del Inca. Welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living. So, my name is Reverend Tim. Why are we here? To support each of us and the community as a whole in living from that part within. That part which I choose to call the soul. It seems to be connected with the universe, with infinite wisdom, and yet is also connected to my body, to my daily life, my thoughts. So it's all integrated, but being the complex people we are, we tend to make it more complex. Steve is going to lead us in our opening meditation and prayer. Steve?
So my word for today is peace. Don't we need that? And so I'm turning to the good old, well-worn Science of Mind textbook. Of course, since this was written in the 1930s, he uses the pronoun he for everything. So you get to to they or she or he or it, whatever works for you as I read it. But I'll read his words, which is he. Peace is the power at the heart of God. It is through the revelation of the self, to the self, that one understands life. That he approaches the power which is at the heart of God. This comes through a recognition of the unity of the individual with the Spirit back of, in, and through all. The problem of philosophy is to unite the infinite with the finite, to join the abstract with the concrete, to find a meeting place between the absolute and the relative, to unify with first cause. The same problem confronts religion as, and is indeed its whole purpose, to unify man with God. This is also true of science, but from a different angle. Science seeks to join causes with effects, and by doing so make practical use of its knowledge. Science is really spiritual. While philosophy leads to true religion, science is the handmaid of religion and philosophy. The world seeks a solution of its great riddle. The apparent separation between God and man, between life and what it does, between the invisible and the visible, between the Father and the Son. And until this riddle is solved, there can be no peace. Peace is an inner calm, obtained through man's knowledge of what he believes and why. Without knowledge, there is no lasting peace. Nothing can bring peace but the revelation of the individual to himself and a recognition of his direct relationship to the universe. He must know that he is an eternal being on the pathway of life, with certainty behind him, certainty before him, and certainty accompanying him all the way. Peace is brought through conscious unity of the personal man the inner principle of his life, an underlying current flowing from a divine center, pressing ever outward into expression. But this could never come by proxy. We can hire others to work for us, to care for our physical needs, but no one can live for us. This we must do for ourselves. I invite you to close your eyes and contemplate peace, the eternal, absolute, everlasting peace that is in, through, and as everything, including ourselves. So I invite you to contemplate the peace that is within you and around you and through you for a few quiet minutes. And so it is.
Thank you. We're going to have a song and then a reading by Arch Crane.
I am remembering who I am. I am remembering who I am.
Tim came across this poem. I really like it. I hope you do too. It's called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what is loved. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clear blue air, are heading home again. Wherever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
You have only to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. So I heard of Mary Oliver through Tara, our oldest daughter, who you glanced at as you walked in, the altar that acknowledges and remembers her. And a lot of what I want to talk about is about remembering. What is important to remember? What does the remembering do? As I was reflecting on it, I realized what a strange season we're in. This is autumn. This is the fall. This is the time when school has begun. And so youngsters are eager to learn and yet frightened, but wanting to be beyond. And I can remember, what did I do with the props? I can remember high school. Here's a picture of me, my Shattuck uniform on, and my very serious look. I haven't changed much, except I had hair there. It was really nice. I'm glad I had it while I had it. So high school, looking to go on to the next step. When am I going to be out? When can I be free? When am I going to find myself? So the university. Because after the university, of course, I'll be something. I'll be somebody. I can accomplish what I'm supposed to accomplish in life. So I brought Arlene. I didn't have my college book, But here's Arlene's Cornell College book about the class of 1969, which they were very careful to make sure that the 6 and the 9 were separated. They didn't want any nuances. Very interesting times. And then after that, it's medical school. I was a class of 73. Here's a picture of me celebrating the 25th reunion. And that's damn near 25 years ago. In 1998, which is another, forgot this one. Not only is it about career, but it's about relationships. And there's my lovely bride and I, in case you're wondering who those strange people are, in 1971. So we remember these things, and remember the sense of possibilities, of going on, imagining what we're going to create, whether it be family or career or have children. That was what that part of life seemed to be about. That's sort of the beginning of the year and what the beginning of autumn is like. But autumn is also a lot about, in the lands that I came from, about harvesting, about taking in what you've created, because it's great to plant stuff, but if you don't reap what you sow, then there's no purpose in sowing. In this case, it was reaping the things that came out of life. And a lot of time and energy and a lot of songs and stories are about having dreams of building things, of universities or businesses or changing things, stopping war, doing something about inequality or about suffering, about doing. And one of the things that I liked about my trip to the Inca land is the image of the three sort of symbols that they had about life. One was a snake, second was a puma, and the third was a condor. And I'll talk a little bit more about the snake, but I love that it was a snake, because there's a snake in Christianity and in the Judeo-Christian tradition called, somewhere I think it was in the the Garden of Eden and something like that. Does anybody ring a bell with anybody? And has there been any discussions in your life about what is that about? The snake. And then there's the puma. The puma is a very alert, down to business critter of the earth. Like most lions and tigers and other predatory animals, it's very solid. It has a plan, it has a strategy, and it lives in the moment, but it's doing, being active. The condor, on the other hand, is this symbol of the gods, the infinite, the height. So where the serpent is on the ground and maybe signifies what's underground, and the condors are the stretching for the divine. So in the fall, a lot of energy in what most of the society is focusing on is what is to come. What is to come. Now I've noticed that as I've achieved a certain age, that 20-year planning, although interesting, doesn't seem entirely relevant. Might be. I have a friend, George Rell, who was here, who sent us his memoirs lately. He's 95, and his story is an important one. It's an interesting one about what it was like, and it was like being born in the 30s, brought up in the middle of the 30s in Poland during the time, and then being invaded by Hitler, and then being invaded by the Russians, and spending some time in the Gulag and blah, 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 and then finally getting to America, where he was drafted and time to be sent off to Vietnam, and has an interesting story. That as I realize it, many of the things that he experienced there's nobody I know who experienced those, who's still alive. The depression and being of age in the depression was, like, wow, that's... And as I think about my life now, especially with younger people, including my kids and some of the people I associate with in the Spanish language men's group that has people from 20 to 60, but they weren't there. They were not there for that. They weren't there for things that I remember. I remember Ike. I remember the day John F. K. was shot. I remember those things. The feelings that were associated with that, the struggle with my brothers in Vietnam that I don't, this is not what I'm for. And how do I be for my country and yet be against what it's doing? Those things only we can remember. Our children can't remember those. So there's something important about remembering. One of the things I've done with my daughters, with the encouragement of my wife, was to take them on little adventures. So Tara, for instance, we went backpacking in the Olympic National Park. Now for many people, that would not be an incident. I was not a backpacker, and it was pretty much an adventure. And it's also, in case you hadn't heard, it rains in the Olympic Peninsula. And we were all wet for 3 or 4 days as we went out to camp. But it was an adventure. I did the Seattle to Portland ride on a tandem with Alexa. And that was the other adventure. And that was quite a weekend, actually. She's still not very eager to get on a tandem with me. We did something else, though, besides an adventure. An adventure is kind of like a Puma action. It's something that we choose to go through. The other one with Alexa that was striking was going to Kenya. It was after her divorce. She had a kid of 6 or 7, and he went with us. Arlene said, "I don't think I'm going to bounce around in a Jeep. You guys go and have a good time." But it was an adventure. It was coming up against things, seeing things, and it was us doing things. But it was an adventure. It was more like Ulysses. If you remember the Odyssey, there were adventures, little things as he came into different situations that he had to deal with and cope with and figure out how to get through. But he did it really as a clever human being, a Puma. But there's another way of being that I am not exactly well acquainted with, because I'm basically a Puma-oriented person. Give me a problem and I'll solve it. I like to solve problems. I like to have projects. I like to get things done. Or at least I have liked to. I find that my enthusiasm is somewhat diminished as some of my capacities are also diminished. It's like, this isn't as much fun right now. Plus, what do I care? If this is done and kept up for 20 years from now. So a different kind of trip besides an adventure is a pilgrimage. And I think as a model of what our lives are about is a more useful one and a richer one. Now I realize that mostly the word pilgrim, aside from being Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims in Massachusetts, which is probably more people in the United States know that there were pilgrims that made Thanksgiving happen than know what a pilgrimage is. But a pilgrimage normally is used in the context of actually very religious people, as it was described in the poem, being on my knees and suffering and struggling, and it's sort of and there is a certain amount of danger and risk and effort involved in a pilgrimage. So going to Jerusalem or going to Mecca, or even going to Rome, or going to the Camino, Costello. And that movie that Sheehan made about it brought it home to me a little bit what that was about. It shows that there's something that can happen for those who aren't necessarily religious, but who see themselves as spiritual. Meaning it's not tied with all the traditions specifically, but knowing that somehow what people have gone through and how they've experienced life and their spirituality and their religion, whatever that was all good and all a contribution to where we are now. So a pilgrimage. Tara went on a pilgrimage for 9 months. I think it was going to be her junior year in college, and it was put on by the Buddhists and peace activists. And they started in Auschwitz and went to various places 50 years after the end of World War II. And it ended as they went kind of around the world, somehow not going to the New World, because that was not quite what was involved in as much. But they ended up in Japan, where we joined her. And they ended up in Japan at Hiroshima on the 50-year anniversary. And I found myself with 200,000 other people, mostly Japanese Buddhists and such, Japanese people, but a significant number of Americans, and it struck me, a number of Vietnam vets who were there. And so I was with these people and in that atmosphere and feeling what they were feeling about the tragedy, about the senselessness, about the cruelty, the inhumanity of that event. And as I was present with that memory, what does she talk about? The soft animal of your body love what is loved. So that's part of me that was sad and grieving, and I remembered very, very clearly discussions with my mother, probably around 1955 when I was 7 or 8, in there, about why it was necessary that the United States do that. For her, it was necessary because she had 2 brothers who were Marines who were on the landing units in the Pacific. And from her perspective, it would mean if they did not do that, that they would be involved in trying to take over, storm Japan, and clearly would be at high risk of not surviving. And I can remember from the feeling in her voice that as she said this and meant it and believed it, also the deep knowing that it wasn't okay. It's like, methinks thou do protest too much. And as I think back about the things that I have defended in my life in some way or another, often there is that quality. I may be arguing as though I wanted to convince you. I know and you don't, and you need to see it the way I do. But many times it was out of the sense of, this is not okay, but I don't know how to make it okay, and I'd rather somehow, if I can just think it right, I can make it right. The animal, soft animal within, what I have called the soul, the essence of who I am, really does know. It does know. And it knows when things are not going together well. So this is a time, would she describe it, to share whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination and calls you like the wild geese. So from that place of sorrow and despair that she invites us to share is also this realization that from that deep place we can also imagine and create differently. So that's what this time of life is about for us. I see it. For me, it is allowing those memories to come up. Boy, an example was one of my fellows shared that he was listening to music and the YouTube kept running and it came up with Johnny Mathis. How many people can imagine the voice of Johnny Mathis in here? Well, for him, his melancholy sister used to listen to it and repeat it over and over and over. And there is a kind of a sadness often to some of the Johnny Mathis kind of songs that does touch us. But for him, it was getting in touch with that sense of his sister who lived in melancholy and who eventually committed suicide. And that knowing that he knew as a child that this something was not okay, but he didn't know what to do about it or how to respond or what it meant. That within those memories, whether it be from childhood of being 9 and talking about nuclear war, to the response, the feeling in the room when it was announced that JFK had been killed. And we can go on, each of us, our memories. MLK, the years of to and fro in the war on poverty and the war on, not even war, the struggle with how to create a truly just society that really does work for everybody. Most of us come from those kinds of thoughts, but many of us have different threads, different means, different places to access the soul, to feel, to refeel, to recognize the experience of the child, that soft animal within, and realize that that's where the healing is. That's what we can heal in ourselves. And it does make a difference. It makes a difference when we're present with our children, our grandchildren, when we're present with each other. That I can look in your eyes, recognize the sorrow and the glory, the sense of wonder and curiosity and creativity that are such wondrous gifts, but underneath which is that sense of recognizing and knowing and experiencing the pain and the suffering of all of humanity through all the ages. So I feel, for instance, a very deep linkage to people when I went to Jerusalem, to the Jews, to the Christians, to the people of Islam who are sometimes our guides, and to the Arab Christians, combinations of people who I couldn't even quite imagine what that would be like. But to be present in that sacred place at a time and in a way that clearly there is deep healing that is yet to happen. That there is deep suffering persisting that is just kind of stewing, not resolved. The same with Ukraine. Whoever, quote, wins the war, if anybody has ever won a war, I don't see that happening. But underneath that, what do
each of us need to do in our own healing. We teach in our Science of Mind treatment. So there are sessions with practitioners, and that the practitioner interacts knowing the greater truth, but partly because they know the same pain, that we cannot treat anybody for something, about something that we have not identified or don't know in ourselves. We come from our own place, and we all have the same healing to do. Our life journey is about that. Many of us, and for most of my life, I thought it was about me. And that's normal to be, at least it's normal in my culture, the culture from which I came, that somehow it's, it's all about me, and I got to go do whatever I got to do, and hopefully you guys will get along okay too. The beauty of this time in our life is to know, profoundly know, that it has nothing to do with me personally, except insofar as I'm willing to be present with who I am, all of me, all of those parts of me that have taken on, one way or another, the beliefs, the attitudes, the suffering, the identity, that is what is going into creating this whole experience that for some types of religions is seen as some big mistake or some error to be corrected, or is something that's really not happening, it's not real. For me, it's about knowing that yes, it is real, but yes, we are the answer. We are the answer to the degree that we accept and know who we are. Allow that knowing of who we are to evolve us to where we can be all of who we are. Not just our Puma take care of solving problems or fixing things. Yep, fixing's good, and I'm glad I got paid well for fixing a lot of things. That's great. But for healing. That we are here because we have souls that can sense, connect, and know, and from that heal ourselves and heal others. That's why we are here. That's why we have a future in the present. This is the future. Now is it. It's always been it, and it always will be. So I'll end with this prayer. The prayer that says yes. The prayer that goes within and says, wow, I am all that. Wow, when I stand before these ruins, I can imagine, sense, and experience the disarray that has happened over the centuries, whether it be in Machu Picchu, or in Jerusalem, Rome, Washington, D.C., and the Veterans Memorial. These places that are holy and sacred and worthy of our pilgrimage, if not physical, at least spiritually, to those places, to that which has been experienced. And know that this is part of a divine process, that we are part of that. We are part of the experience, and that which we experience is part of creation. And from that place of knowing, be eternally grateful with a sense of wow, essential. This is incredible. That the universe at its core is filled with love and peace. And it's this that is our gift, the gift to us from the universe. And so it is.
So it is.
This week I found myself on a pilgrimage, the pilgrimage of YouTube. You know, you go on one and then you find another one and you find another one. I was reading something by Oprah and Edwin Gaines' name came up. And, oh, I haven't thought about her in years, certainly not since I left Science of Mind in Seattle. She used to come every year, give her lecture and collect her money and leave us, at least for me, she left me with the gift of a renewal of purpose and a renewal of basic laws of spirituality. So I was reading, I picked up one of her books. There was a freebie, you read it on, it was being read by her, and I'm about halfway through at the four spiritual laws of success or something, something like that. Four laws of spirituality. And I was looking at them, and as I did, I began to realize in my thinking and in who I have become over the last few years, I've lost some of the basics. And so I'm finding that I need to re-energize the basics. For me, one of them is tithing. It was for years and years. I used to write a check, and it was as soon as I got the money, there went the check. But I realized that in losing those basics, I've lost a big piece of myself, of who I am. And so that's what I'm finding this spring is for me, looking back at the basics, figuring out what it is and who I am and who I want to be in the world. And one of them is giving to the place that I receive my spiritual nourishment, which is here. Not the only place, but certainly one of them. Another piece that Edwin was hitting me with was the having goals, setting goals and moving toward them. When I retired, it's kind of like, well, that's over. No more goals. I'm done. I'm finished. And then I realized, but I'm not. And I realized that was also a ditch that I fell into, a hole that I fell into, and finding new goals, finding who I am and rebuilding that is another piece. I still have to get to the other two, but I haven't gotten there yet. So that's, at least for me, is my project for the spring. The other one is one that Tim was talking about, was pilgrimage. Immediately I asked, all right, universe, what's my next step? And I'm told the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. And for me, that's going to be a lot of exercise. That's going to be a lot of strength training for now. I was talking to a couple in the plaza several years ago. Mm-hmm. They had just gotten off the Camino, mm-hmm. and they had done all 500 miles, and they finished it. There was a woman there who had started on. She had started in a walker, and she made it. The first 2 weeks, her son went with her to carry her pack, and at the end of 2 weeks, he had to go back to work. So she carried her pack. By the end of it, she was off her walker. She was walking fine. It is a rebuilding of yourself, and I want to look for myself at what pilgrimage means, why I would want to do that. and then go and do it myself. And I invite anybody else who has the courage to look at themselves, even if you don't do it. Just to look at yourself, challenge yourself to do and be who you want to be. So that's number 2. I haven't figured out the rest.
Across from the front door, there's a prayer box and the form you can fill out if you want to pray. Or there's a place on the website where you can also fill out the form for prayer. And we do a prayer circle every Wednesday morning with 3 ministers and at least 3 or 4 practitioners. And we've been praying a year and a half now, every Wednesday. To invite you to participate of that. Think about Center for Spiritual Living and Science of Mind as we believe in prayer. Prayer works, creates miracles.
For those of you that attended the Convention of the Americas, Be the Light, you automatically get a pass to the virtual convention, which will be the 11th, 12th, and 13th of this month. 11 is a Friday from 6 to 9, and Saturday all day long we will have breakfast, lunch together, yoga, the whole works. There will be the highlights of the presential, the one in person, but there will be also quite a few different things. Everything will be bilingual, so you are invited. If you came to in presence, it's already included. If not, you can join and subscribe to it. And it's Vida Espiritual. Vida Espiritual is like Vida Life Espiritual. .org O-R-G. So you can find the rest.
Where's it going to be?
It's going to be on virtual, on the internet.
Online.
Online.
Yeah.
Imagine all